Penn State's best rusher in the year didn't even have 500 yards. Is Mike Yurcich to blame? Marty, what do you think?
I mean, I understand the frustration with Mike Yurcich that people have. I really do. But for me, it's so much deeper than that. Like first off, Yurcich has a tremendous track record. Everywhere he's been, his offense has been productive. This year, yes, Penn State was struggling to run the ball, but before Cliff got hurt, the offense was productive. And when you look at the offensive line, he was kind of handicapped by this year, and you factor in there being a stretch of games there after the Clifford injury where teams just really didn't take the passing game seriously anymore, and they couldn't run the ball. I don't put a lot of it on Yurcich. I do think next year, regardless of what does or doesn't happen with that offensive line, you got to think the offensive line is going to be better. Like, first off, it'd be difficult not to be. And second off, I think if you put in, guys like Tangwell and Fashanu that we've talked about, maybe slide Caden Wallace to guard. I know there's multiple transfer offensive linemen. Penn State appears to be in a really good position within the portal.
Ruggs under center.
Yeah. Juice to center. That's a big one too. You got to think it's going to be better. And with running back, you get Noah Kane, who hopefully will finally be healthy. Kevon Lee, who is a pretty good back. And then you throw in Nick Singleton, National Gatorade Player of the Year, #1 running back recruit in the country, who's coming in January also. I just have a hard time to believe, are they going to be, they're not going to come out and run the ball like they did down the stretch in 2019 necessarily next year, but you got to think they're going to run the ball better just based purely on the fact it'd be difficult not to, and players are going to bring in, players are going to be able to move positions, players who have another year of growth in the program. You got to think things are going to be better. So I don't put that on Mike Yurcich. And there were a lot of games this year too, and today was one of these where the offense was struggling and guys were open. Like Yurcich was designing things just that wasn't being executed. Like I remember today during the game being super frustrated. There'd be plays, Arkansas secondary scrambling and guys are running around open, and Cliff just didn't have time to set his feet and get the ball to them. So obviously that was a big problem against Iowa also after Clifford went out. Guys are running around open and Taquan Roberson could make throws. I think Yurcich had, I'm not going to say he necessarily had a good season. I know Mike Yurcich wouldn't tell you he had a good season, but he definitely was hurt by poor offensive line play and things kind of snowballed from there. And, just go back and watch the playoff games from yesterday. I don't care what you are, who you are, what level of football it is. If you don't have good offensive line play, you're going to struggle. And the team who has better offensive line play is going to win the football game 90% of the time, if not more. And that was Penn State's biggest issue this year. I can't put that on Mike Yurcich.
Yeah, I would have been inclined to answer the same. My understanding with Yurcich, I think his scheme has a different. I think the blocking is a little different compared to what Kirk Shiraka had, or maybe even what Ricky Ronnie and Joe Moorhead had. Maybe you can fill in the blanks.
Yeah, I do. There is definitely some differences there. The Yurcich running attack, it's very similar more to kind of like that zone power. Like I would say, think back to like the Urban Meyer Florida teams. A lot of that zone power stuff he used to run. It's very similar to that with Yurcich, where with the Shiraka offense and even with the Ronnie offense, yes, there's a lot of zone blocking, but the zone schemes are definitely different. It wasn't as much of a power attack. They would look to go off tackle and that sort of thing more. And, this year with Penn State, with how much the interior offensive line struggled, if you have a coach like Mike Yurcich who wants to build his rushing attack around that power, the zone power attack in between the tackles, they just didn't have the personnel for it. That is why, I still would not rule out an offensive line coach change this offseason. A, because of the struggles of the line, and B, to let Yurcich bring in a guy who would work with his offense better, he feels. We'll see what happens. I definitely know there's been some rumblings that James Franklin is not happy with the performance of Phil Troutline, which, I'm sure Phil Troutline is not happy either with his own performance this season. So we'll see what happens there. But, yeah, I definitely think that the biggest thing for Penn State this offseason is going to be fixing that offensive line. And, you can't – I don't throw that at the feet of an offensive coordinator, especially an offensive coordinator who is in year one and didn't recruit these guys. So you always got to take that in the equation too. An offensive coordinator is going to want certain body types up on that offensive line for pulling, for moving to the second level, for whatever it might be. So that's a factor also. But yeah, I don't put the struggles of the offensive line on Yurcich. I don't think you can. It's not fair to do it all.
Right. I'd be inclined to agree with that too. I mean, your O line is subpar. I mean, it's going to severely hamper your offense. I don't care who you've got, calling plays for your team. And like I said, I think it's just by default. I can't see how this line is not going to be better next year. Now, that's not going to be saying much. How much better is if it can just even be serviceable? It would be a huge step up. I mean, if it can be like, honestly, I'm talking about like 2016 level offensive line. I mean, that wasn't exactly a great O line by any stretch of the means. They were serviceable though.
Yeah, and I feel very confident in saying, and I'm sure people out there who watch Penn State a year will agree, if they would have got even serviceable offensive line play this year, probably go 9-3 at worst. You probably still beat Illinois and Iowa,
Because maybe Cliff doesn't get hurt.
Yeah, it's true. Because I mean, you go back to the play Cliff got hurt on. He had Brenton Strange wide open for potential touchdown and just took a wallop and overthrew him. So if he doesn't get hit there, Strange catches it, walks in the end zone. It's 21-3. Clifford's not hurt. Who knows where their season goes at that point? So yeah, with even mediocre average offensive line play this year, they would have been a completely different team. It's just the offensive line play. And I think what was so frustrating for me with it was they struggled early on. And it's like, all right, you played Wisconsin, one of the best front sevens in the country. You played Auburn. They're always going to have a tough front seven. But really, for me, it started with that Villanova game where they still couldn't run the ball. And you're just like, oh, my God, this is not going to be good. And as the season went on, the offensive line play seemed to get worse. And that's where it was frustrating for me, was to watch these guys seemingly regress. And then against Rutgers, who actually is a half-decent defensive front seven, see a bunch of young guys thrust out there because of the flu, playing okay, made it even more frustrating because it's like, all right, clearly these backups are capable. Why couldn't we have seen them earlier? But, all of that's off-season fodder filler conversation. But, yeah, it's going to come down to the offensive line. It's like we've said, it's the most important. Other than quarterback, it's the most important position in football is you're up in the trenches. And Penn State's got a lot of work ahead of them this offseason with the offensive line.
No doubt. And you mentioned Brenton Strange, which also brings me to another disappointing position on the offensive side of the ball, which was the tight ends. Going into this season, we were all pretty gung ho about Brenton Strange and Theo Johnson being a dynamite 1-2 tandem. And while they both had their moments in the sun, there was certainly a lack of consistency as far as being pass catching threats, or even helping align with blocking. And I guess a lot of blame is for that's been going on. First year coach Ty Howell, who was promoted from, I believe, he was a grad assistant.
Yeah, he was a grad assistant.
Got promoted to his position after Tyler Bowen left to join the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I believe Bowen, I don't know if it's official, but I believe Brent Pry hired him at Virginia Tech to be their offensive coordinator. So
I'm pretty certain it is official. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty certain the move. I think once Urban Meyer was shown the door, that's when Bowen didn't bother to stick around and finish year out in Jacksonville.